Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this little bit of Aramaic. I hope you've had a wonderful, meaningful Christmas, and we're just happy to get back into our studies again. Um, we finished the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount, and now I thought some direction we would take is looking at some of the classic verses that many of you are familiar with, and just taking a look at them in the Peshitta Aramaic and see if there's some slightly different um, encouragement or understandings that we can derive from that. So today we're going to the what's traditionally known as the Lord's Prayer, taken from Matthew chapter 6 and starting with the ninth verse. On the screen, you can see the Astrangala script at the top. You see the Hebrew square script underneath, and then you have the Etheridge English translation, which of course just says, "Thus pray, our Father who art in heavens." So let's take a look at this a little bit. If you want, trying to read it in the Aramaic. Again, we don't know exactly how it sounds. We know we can make some approximations on it. And so we'll try to do that today. So the part that starts out, thus pray, would be Achana, Achil, Salav, Atun. What you will notice here is this word that has the Aleph, Nun, um, the doubling Dagesh for the Tav, and then the shorter Nun. The Nun is not pronounced. You have to look above to the Esperanto script, and you'll see that underneath the Nun, there's a little line that is an indicator that that Nun is not to be pronounced. It is there in the written form, and so this would be pronounced a tune, not on tune. And so you can't really tell that from the square script. They seem to ignore that uh, that little small point. So we have to stay with the Strongylus script up here, and we'll be able to see that it's called lineus occultus. Just means that you don't emphasize or read that letter, so the noon is left out. Again, what catches my eye here is there are two words that are very similar. The hey, kaf, and hey and kaf. One has a noon. Here is the aleph, which would be the direct object marker, or um, the letter of basically telling you that it is the um, direct object here. So let's analyze this and see what we happen to see. When we break this apart, it looks like all of them are pretty much saying the same. Etheridge uses thus pray. Murdoch says in this manner, therefore pray ye. Therefore pray in this manner. After this manner pray ye. What we notice here is these first two words of describing how you should pray, translated as thus and therefore, are very similar. And so that catches our attention as to why is the spelling the same? Why is it duplicated there? And it is an indication of taking us towards the start of this prayer, which of course is to pray. And one of the things that the disciples were always pestering Jesus about was, teach us how to pray. And that's what prompted this. And so this part, I think, has something to it that maybe isn't brought out in the translation. So as we unpack this and we open up this word here, which is 5189, we look at it, it basically has the translation as THUS, or thus. Not a lot there. We got to look a little deeper, and we have to go to the um, um, understanding from Marcus Jastrow as to what could be the meaning of this. So as we look this up in Marcus Jastrow, we see it's on page 350 for those of you that have your own at home and want to follow along. Um, and here is the word thus, but there are two forms of it, and we find that both of those are used in the beginning of this verse. So why the repetition? Notice right underneath here, we see the exact same two words, but have a different translation, a different understanding. And this is where it looks really, this is mind-opening. These two words, as I'm reading here, used as a technical term in preparing and a designation for use on the Sabbath or the holy day. This is really interesting that this was somewhat of a teaching of how important this prayer would be. And what we don't know is, was this something that was possibly added a little bit later on? Um, or was it taken as both interpretations? And that's why we have this entry in the Marcus Jastrow. Remember, Marcus Jastrow is coming from a viewpoint of the Aramaic translations of the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament, and the translation into Aramaic, such as used in the oral tradition. So he's not looking at it from a Christian viewpoint. He didn't have Matthew in mind when this was penned, and this was taken from the ancient traditions. So this dual meaning just stands out to me, that there's something deeper here. And that's why uh, possibly the Lord's Prayer has taken on such a tradition of meaning and such a heartfelt meaning that most people can recite it. It's recited at all major life events. Anytime that there are uh, certain things happening that are traumatic in a person's life, the Lord's Prayer is something that is often recited, no matter what the spirituality of the person or the level of spirituality. This Lord's Prayer becomes very important to them, and they recite it, or desire it to be recited. And so these two words, uh, in their weakest form of translation, are thus and therefore, but in a somewhat behind the scenes meaning, it designates how special this next reading is going to be. I think it's an indicator that would not have been lost on those that were hearing Jesus um, speak in Aramaic. And had he used these words, they would have taken this as something that they've heard in the temple, in the synagogue, alerting them that these next words were going to have very strong, be very meaningful, and that they should be paying attention to what is coming up next. So as we continue with our unpacking here, um, we see the next word we look at is the word that's translated as prayer, which is salah. And it is, again, a very, very interesting word. And so let's unpack that and see what we have to find. Again, looking at the meanings here, this word to pray, we as 21st century Midwesterners, we think of prayer as more of a mental exercise, or more of a thought process, something, that we can pray silently. And of course, that's all valid. But in the Middle Eastern mindset, look at the translations of this word that's salem. What it is having to bring about is motion. You see, to incline, to bend something, to listen, to pay attention to pray. There's motion here. There's bending, there's setting, there's extending, there's moving away. Something is offered. It changes from a mental exercise to more of a physical exercise. And let's unpack this here by looking at Marcus Jastrow. And here we see the word on page 1282. And of course, there are different forms translated as prayer. But what's I like to look at is in these Hebrew and the Aramaic dictionaries, the root words have meaning to them. And so if we go to a previous page here where it has the Sadi and the Lamed, It is the word for shade or shadow. Um, those of you that may be familiar with the Hebrew that's used in the book of Genesis, where it says that man was created in the image of God, the word used here for creation in the image of God is Selem, meaning in the shadow, in not so much image as far as hands, feet, uh, those sort of things, but it's a shadow. And it adds to just a deeper layer of understanding that we were created in the shadow of God. And of course, there's many different nuances of that. You know, God is spirit. Um, and so we have the personality side, the emotional side, the context of having feelings and emotions and an ability to communicate are all attributes of God. All of those attributes that He has of love and of mercy, of goodness, of kindness, all are part of His shadow, if you will, part of His image. And then, of course, Jesus, who was is the the image of God in flesh on this earth, also becomes this Selim, the shadow and the foreshadowing of this. And so that's such a rich understanding of this word that leads to prayer. And so we ask ourselves, well, what's the connection here? Where is this word for shadow influence to create the word for prayer? Well, to make it even more interesting is if we follow this, the input here into the lexicon, we see that this same root word with the adding of an aleph on the end has to do with stretching. And of course, that ties in with this movement of when you're engaged in prayer, what is happening to you physically? What is happening to you emotionally and spiritually? The stretching even gets more involved here. Put a bait on the end of it, and you have to hang, to impale. You suddenly start feeling some strong emotions that are tied into this word of impaling, of to be hanged, to gild. That's putting a covering on the outside. It talks about being burnished, all working of metals to bring out different properties. The word flashing, of being a bright flash. And then you look on the other side of the word for prayer, you see again some very strong words that have to deal with emotions, or I would say deeper than emotions, but hardships that come upon the body, of the gallows, of being impaled, of staking and impaling and hanging. And here in the midst of this is this word for prayer. Um, Really, I wonder if this is teaching us that our prayers have to really be taken out of the mental assent, out of the mental type of silent prayer, and that the physicality is really what drives the prayer to a deeper level. That when you're feeling it in your body, you feel the stretching, you feel the agony. Very similar, I think, to when Jesus prayed in the garden, and it says that his prayers were so strong that he sweat, as it were, great drops of blood. I see this all fitting in beautifully with this cell, cellum of this type of movement, this type of encounter, this type of experience that um, is part of what Middle Easterners and the ancients knew as prayer, that maybe we haven't quite grasped so readily in our modern culture of what prayer is really meaning to be. And so that's just a very simple, basic look at what we see here as being the Lord's Prayer. And we're going to stop there today. And then we're going to pick up next week with the part that, of course, everyone is familiar with, the Our Father. And we'll take a look at where this maybe came from and some of the influences that existed in Jewish thought before this prayer was taught and given. So God bless you all. I hope you enjoy this little study. I want to encourage you on how wonderful the Aramaic language is, and If you ever want any help with the studies, please toss me a note. Be happy to get you started and help you any way I can. God bless you all, and see you next week. Bye-bye.